In this video, I'll be giving you an overview of the tools used in knitting, as well as getting you familiar with working with them so that you can get started. First, let me introduce you to circular knitting needles. When you picture knitting in your mind, you may imagine two straight needles that look like pointy sticks, and not two needles that are connected with a loop like this, but circular knitting needles work just the same way that straight knitting needles do, but they can also knit additional things that are circular, like a hat or a sweater sleeve or a body of a sweater. We're going to be working on a flat project, and they work just as well for that by simply just reversing them when you've reached the end of a row. If that doesn't make sense now, don't worry. I'll get more into that in another video. The anatomy of knitting needles that I might refer to, this is the tip of a needle right here. This narrow portion leading towards the tip of the needle is called the neck of the needle. This part here is the shaft of the needle. And then this is the cord that connects the two knitting needles. When you're working with knitting needles, you are going to hold them your own unique way, just the same way that everybody holds utensils or pencils a little bit differently. Knitting needles, you know, I can show you the way that I hold them and you'll see the way that I hold them while knitting, but everybody develops their own unique hold for knitting needles based on what feels the most comfortable to them. I hold knitting needles like this, similar to the way that I might cut a knife, use a knife while cutting my food. This is a cone of yarn. You might be more familiar with a ball of yarn, but this yarn is an organic cotton yarn that is made by Gist, which is a weaving yarn company, and weaving yarn is typically put on cones like this to make it easy to use with a loom. This yarn is great for weaving, but it is also a totally beautiful knitting yarn and works really, really well. So you don't need to do anything to use your cone other than just pick the outside thread, not the bottom thread that's tucked in here. I don't even think you could get to that, but you can just tuck that up into the cone and you'll just work with the yarn like that. I'm going to show you how to get your very first stitch onto your needle. It's with something called a slip knot. So you're going to leave about a 6-inch tail of yarn like this. And with this hand, you're going to wrap the yarn around your finger like that, your fingers, and create a loop. And then you're going to take the end of your yarn that's connected to the cone and just pull a loop through like that. I will demonstrate that again. So with the tail off to the side, wrap once, pull the end through, and tighten it up. Take your knitting needle and you will pull the two ends of yarn apart to get it snug, tight on your needle. When you are working with knitting, it's important to keep an eye on the tension of your knitting, not the tension that you're feeling, although the tension that you're feeling can relate to the tension of your knitting. You want the needles to be able to slide up and down the shaft of the needle. Sorry, you want the stitches to be able to slide up and down the shaft of the needle like that. But you want it where they're not going to fall off the needle. So it should be loose enough to move up and down easily, but not so loose that it just pops right off without any tugging on it at all. When you are holding the yarn, you're also going to develop just the way that you'll develop the way that you hold your needles, your own unique grasp of the yarn. I tend to try to have a little bit of yarn off the cone over here. And when I'm knitting, I like to wrap my yarn around my index finger, and then I tension with my pinky finger. So you won't always be able to see this action because it'll be behind my hand, but this is what it looks like. When I first learned to knit, I felt like the yarn was really unruly, and I would tend to kind of wrap it all around my fingers like this. And the more times you wrap it, the tighter your tension is going to be. Every time it bends around your fingers like this, you can think of that as adding a new tension point. So typically keeping it nice and loose like this, just one tension point here and one tension point here is all you're really going to need. And that's it. You should be ready to get started.